Hello, my friends. This is life coach Mike Trugman, and welcome to an episode of Mike's Search for Meaning. I'm after some big questions. Why are we here? What makes a fulfilling life? How can we grow individually and collectively? Each episode, I'll dive deep with leaders who are doing great work in the world and see how they organize their life. Books read, value systems, resources used, and stories that show how each of you can create the life and the world of your dreams. All right, Lissy, welcome to my humble dojo, my creation, Mike's Search for Meaning. It's really a pleasure to have you on. Our conversations are always so rich, and it's an opportunity now to invite other people in and see what changes or insights we can create for other people that are already created within our own conversation. So it's really great to be with you here, and welcome to my show.
Thanks for having me to the dojo. It's really, really special to be here.
So I wanted to start with you. The show is called Mike's Search for Meaning, and I've been thinking, I was sharing with you, it's the first interview conversation that I'm doing on the show in over a year. Part of that has been, I've been taking a step back and evaluating, like, what do I want this show to be? And if someone were to tune in, what can they reliably expect to get out of it? And who does it serve? And all those types of things. And I've been thinking about, whatever someone's focal point of their work is, like, how did they come across it? So in your case, I want to start with you around mental fitness, and more specifically around mental fitness. When did that, I have an idea of what that might mean. I'm speaking from a listener's perspective. I have an idea of what that might mean if I'm tuned in here. But I'm curious, when did that become something that you started to pay attention to in your life? And what drew you to such a thing?
It's so interesting because I feel like, whenever you have these conversations, it's really natural to want to pin it down to one moment. I feel like I have been searching for mental fitness for my whole life. The way today we define mental fitness is it's the ability to tackle your goals and your day with vigor, consistency, and joy. And I have been looking for that consistency. I felt like since I was a kid, I noticed that I was more stressed than other kids about school. And I wasn't one of those grade A perfectionists who was getting A pluses and nervous about it. When I didn't study, I failed. When I didn't apply myself fully, I felt like things just didn't go well. And so it's interesting. I feel like the moment I realized I was not my thoughts, I was on the beach with my brother. I don't think I've ever told this story before. I was on the beach with my brother, and I remember telling him that I was sad. And he said to me, "You're not sad, you're having sad thoughts." And I literally wanted to push him over, stop correcting my grammar. You know what I mean? This isn't a moment for grammar, pen. And, I collected myself and was like, what the hell are you talking about? And he was like, "Well, you're not a sad person," because he's right. I'm actually quite joyful. "You're just having sad thoughts right now. And it's important to notice them, but you don't have to be them." And he had read about this concept in Jonathan Haidt's book called The Happiness Hypothesis. And for those who are listening, we're just I have no idea what we're talking about. The whole idea here is that he was basically trying to point out to me this concept of metacognition, which is seeing your thoughts, not being them, so that you can shift them over time. And I think it was the first time it made me realize that working on my stress didn't have to mean changing how stressful my outsides were. It wasn't necessarily about changing my work or my job or my relationship. It was really about making sure that I could change my insides so that I could handle those stressful moments better. And I'd say that was, I don't even know. I mean, I think it was 15 years ago, maybe longer, when he brought that up. And that was when I realized I could work on my thoughts.
Hmm. What do you think? So 15 years ago, you were, place us where specifically you were in your life at that point. So was that were you in the workforce? Were you college, high school?
So I was in the workforce. I think I was maybe 2 years out of school. I was dating somebody at the time who was a challenge. The relationship was a challenge. And we were on summer vacation. Like I must have been taking like a long weekend with my family at my cousin's house. Um, and I remember being so miserable at work. I mean, at this point, I had been looking for a new job for quite a while. Sorry about that. I have a cold. And yeah, I was confiding to my brother about how I was feeling just generally in my relationship and my life. And that was when he brought that up to me.
It sounds like an initial response to your brother was anger, let's call it. What do you think, like, if that is a strong enough moment in your life that it's being brought up on a podcast 15 years later, and you maybe started to answer this a little bit in that you were like in a challenging relationship and were having challenges in your career, but what do you think allowed you to be open to receive that and to like do something with it, or to uh, start to make sense? Like, it sounds like it had an impact on the way that you see yourself and see human behavior and the world, etc. Like, what allowed that to occur?
I think the big thing for me was that it was almost like this, I said it earlier, it's a little bit of the opposite. I said it earlier, like, wow, mental fitness is almost this answer of like, I could work on my insides so that my outsides didn't have to be perfect. Like the world didn't have to be perfect for me to feel calm. But it was almost an offer that my insides also, everything I experienced wasn't necessarily that real. Um, which is like pretty cool to think that it wasn't real, especially when it felt really real and hard. Like, and that I could somehow like dissociate from that right now. Like I didn't have to change. I didn't have to wait because at the time I was looking for a job like crazy. So I didn't have to wait for a new job. I didn't have to, make sure my relationship was better between my boyfriend at the time and I. It was kind of this like answer to like almost like solving my pain, like right in that moment. Like,
Hmm.
wow, you don't have to be it. You just have to see it. It
Yeah.
sounds super meta.
Yeah, well, that where I wanted to go then, and like I've been there before in all the different, maybe not all exactly at the same time, but I have definitely been in a place, and still today, like I can have thoughts and feelings that have their hooks deeply enough in me that I'm like, no, my relationship is the reason that I am feeling frustrated right now, and there's nothing that Mike Trugman can do to get out of that, or my job, or my clients, or whatever. Could be any number of different things. So if we were to make it really practical, you could take it in any, don't you could take it with the relationship that you had, or and maybe something current today. How do you look at putting into practice that you could, in the same conditions, more or less, in the same, with the same partner, with the same job, with the same external looking life, how do you put into practice that you could shift the way that you're feeling inside, or behaving, or thinking of, however you would describe it?
Yeah, I think the way that I do that now is way different than what I did back then. I mean, back then it was the idea that I could state something, especially an extrovert, because I process externally. Like I could say something and everything I said didn't have to be true forever. So like knowing like, hey, this is a moment where I would love to just share how I'm feeling. Know that like this might not be forever was like a really powerful tool for me to express myself to my family members. Um, Meaning like I need you to listen, not solve. Um, because half the time I would say something out loud and I'd be like, ooh, is that true for me every day or just today?
Mm.
And all of a sudden I didn't have to be held accountable to the way that I felt all the time. Um, I think also like, I don't think I was journaling at the time, but I noticed that when I was running, and I was running half marathons at the time, when I was running, I was more able to think through things without like the emotional element to them. So I could see an argument from multiple perspectives at the end of a long run. Or I could like notice the conversation my boss was trying to have with me and be like, why were they bringing that up to me a couple times? oh, this is what they must have been saying. And so I found that running allowed me to create, again, this like metacognition. And that's how I was like more readily able to start to like notice like these couple tools that would help me. Now my knee ended up getting busted. And so running was like probably my main source of that. And then all of a sudden that went away. And I joke that's what kind of led me to the next thing, the next, until I found my way into building a company.
Mm. Well, let's ping pong around a little bit. So, MYNDY is MYNDY is ostensibly just a company that supports people in building mental fitness habits, etc. Correct?
Yeah, yeah. So we help people essentially build the right mindset to achieve their goals and feel good while doing so. We like to think of ourselves as like a gym for your mind. So eventually, what we'll have is like everything a gym would have: personal training, group training classes, and individual ways to come in and quote unquote use the machinery. But the biggest issue and why it's taken so long to get started with all of this was that I've had to define like what is mental fitness. Like when we think
Mm-hmm.
about physical fitness, it's somebody who has the capability or capacity to live, a healthy life, in their body. And they practice that with HIIT, yoga, running, cardio, basic functional movement. But my question was like, what are all the things I can do to work out my mind, and how are those things going to affect different parts of my psychology?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I ended up building this model to help people understand how to practice mental fitness. And then now, again, my obsession is this accountability, like helping people follow through on the best of their intentions.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. So there's two things occurring inside me right now. I mean, there's more than that, but two things I'm present to right now. One is if we were to take a look at the different building blocks, like if someone were to just come to, hey, Lissy, right now, I am ready to address every element of my mental fitness. This is the way I'm thinking about it. Maybe I'm incorrect here, but like I'd be curious to know, all right, so what are the ways, if I were to like surround myself by the best types of thinking, how would I nurture the best type of environment for thoughts in myself? And how would I set my environment up to sleep well and to move well? And what types of relationships would I be in? And how would I know that I'm doing the right type of work? And like all the different elements that contribute to the way that you think about things. Like and emotional landscape and even spirituality is something that I think about, but it probably isn't built into. It's probably hard to have quantitative research backed models that support spirituality. But I think you're probably picking up what I'm putting down on that element. So just putting a pin in that as something that I would love to get back into. Another curiosity is around who has influenced the way that you think about mental fitness, and what have you learned from said people?
Yeah. No one's ever asked me that question before, and I love being asked questions I've never been asked before. Um, Potentially a cheesy answer, but the first thing that comes to mind is like my clients. Um, when I think about some of my earliest clients, it was my family. Um, I think about my mom. She hadn't worked out in decades. And she, I believe, was going through some health stuff at the time. And I put her on the MYNDY program. And at the time, I was so focused on making sure it was research backed and quantitative and people would take us seriously. But my mom's favorite part of the program was every day we would celebrate with like a literal physical like celebration, and she would get to pick a sticker, like a really sparkly sticker to put on her chart. This was before I had any tech. And we still laugh and talk about those celebratory moments. And I feel like making sure that celebration, joy, and playfulness is a part of everything that I do,
Mm.
even while trying to stay serious, has been hard at times, especially when people don't take me seriously or something's not happening. The natural inclination is I need more of this thing that the world accepts and sees as grown up and therefore worthy of funding or time. But I think like that's one of the big things that comes to mind. Another one is one of my brothers went through the MYNDY program when I first started, again, before I had any tech. And he was super stressed, and I just kept it dead simple for him. And Sometimes I think, one of my pieces of work is, do I feel like I'm enough to be doing this? I'm not a therapist. I'm trying to focus on being, not doing. Um, but in those moments when I was working with him, and what he always comes back to is the simple stuff. And so making this stuff not only fun, but simple, while being taken seriously and showing people that this works and that it's different, has been a balance. And then there's there's the countless academics that like the actual research is based on. I could list like any one of those. I'd say Angela Duckworth was one of the most, it's not Angela Duckworth. She's amazing. She wrote Mindset. Who wrote Grit?
Angela Duckworth.
Angela
Yeah.
Duckworth. Yes. So sorry, I was right.
Carol Dweck wrote
Carol Dweck
Mindset.
wrote
Yeah.
Mindset. Thank you. Side effects of being sick on a podcast. But basically, Angela Duckworth in her book, there was a little piece of that when Martin Seligman, the founder of positive psychology, said to her, like, what's your theory? And she was like, well, I have all these findings and I don't know what my theory is. And he said, come back to me when you have a theory. And even in the book, she expressed like almost anger at him for pushing her like that. And I remember having a post-it up on my wall saying, what's my theory for mental fitness? And that was what pushed me to build this into an equation and a benchmark score. And I see it as part of one of our biggest differentiators. But that moment in the book, yes, the actual message of grit was incredibly powerful. She's like, what I call our hero researcher under resilience. But I'd say that she was really important. And then I think about, it's so silly. I mean, I listen to How I Built This. Like every entrepreneur I listen to, pushes me to remember that this is like an everyday for decades kind of thing. So, I could speak about any one of those, specifically the Dippin' Dots founder.
Yes.
Really inspired me. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm wondering too, like, so the Dippin' Dots founder you shared with me, just to reveal myself to listeners, audience here, I always ask if there was an appearance that you made, Lissy, on a podcast that stood out to you, and or a podcast that was most memorable to you that you listened to. And you said anyhow I built this, but the Dippin' Dots founder was one that really stood out to you. And you were also sharing with me immediately before we came on here, in so many words, the continual improvement over time. Sounds like that's the echoes of what you're talking about here, is like things that might look like nothing when there's a stick-to-itiveness over a certain duration of time, there's a massive result that ends up occurring that you might not even recognize was happening all along, and then bam, here you are. So I'm curious, you could share in your own experience and or the episode in How I Built This around the Dippin' Dots founder, like what's been, if that's something that's fresh for you that you've been thinking a lot about, so give us some more color and language around that.
Yeah, I think when it comes to the Dippin' Dots founder, one, I loved Dippin' Dots as a kid. It's ice cream of the future, like just it was always novel, and it was only in certain amusement parks. It was like when there was joy, there was Dippin' Dots. Like that's kind of how I felt. It was never like Dippin' Dots in the middle of a gray rainy day or like a random parking lot. Like it was cool. It's like they went where the fun was. But the founder just has this like incredibly tragic story around like the IP and the struggle that he went through for decades to bring Dippin' Dots to the world. And I don't want to give away the story, but it wasn't this like, you know, rosy story of how Mr. Dippin' Dots is now sitting on a yacht looking back on his 30 years. Like there was real struggle there. And I think him bringing this new innovation to the world was such a huge part of the way he wanted to show up, and consistently showed up with his values. And it was just a good reminder that like, you can do all the right things and struggle and still say you would do it all over again. Even if you don't have that ending. And I really admired him. So that was kind of the Dippin' Dots story. When I think about my own journey and where I'm at now, I'd say, it was just a couple weeks ago. Like I've been building this business now for 6 years, and in ways feel like a total failure, like on paper. Like most founders by now would be in, the multi-million-dollar EBITDA and, working on their series blank. And for me, I feel like I just started making what I call baby revenue. Um, I feel like I have, in many ways, they say you spiral up, so you end up in the same place over and over again, just at a higher level. I had to remind myself I was spiraling up, not down, because for for so many reasons, I keep revisiting parts of this business that I was playing with years ago. Like I thought I would have evolved past this. Like I just last week brought back a program that I stopped running 2.5 years ago. I'm back to Squarespace as like my website platform as a silly little example. I was using all these more complicated ones because I just want complete control over my website so I can change the language every 2 seconds. Um, I'm using a lot of the brand language that I used 5 years ago with a brand consultant. Shout out to Ben Green. Yeah, it's like what's old is new again. And I think this feeling of, and what's funny is I just started this new YouTube channel, which I also, Mike and I were talking about before the show. And I had somebody share feedback that like the YouTube channel was like unprofessional, and that it isn't like shiny enough. And I need to go back to my interviews that I was doing. But I promised myself, as a little trigger warning, I had a miscarriage a couple months ago and had to hit reset with the business. And two big takeaways I had from that experience, because they say never waste a crisis. It's one, it was I had to do less things because I was feeling like I was failing at the 16 that I was doing. And I was like, it just wasn't going well. So how do I do fewer things? And then how do I make sure I have a lot of fun, which is something Mike and I talk a lot about. And with those two things, I've now started revisiting again old tools and projects that I was working on through the lens of my 3 priorities. And hearing feedback like that, like, hey, this isn't the right thing, used to rock me. Like it would make me be like, oh, I got to rethink everything. Like, I don't really care. Like I appreciate the data point, but I've noticed I am now more confident than ever in what I'm doing. And it's at the margin. It's like all these like little bits that I've almost like built the foundation. So instead of letting everything shake me, I'm just not going anywhere in a good way, about what I'm building and how I'm building it. And so I just kind of keep coming back to that. Like time doesn't have to mean exponential progress. Sometimes that progress can be about roots, and roots mean you're not going anywhere. You're just standing where you're standing stronger. So yeah, I like to think of myself as a tree, and I want to remind everyone that progress doesn't mean being on a track with like as a train, getting from A to B. Like sometimes it's about being where you are better.
Mm-hmm. Let's go. That's
Let's
powerful.
go.
Let's go. I'm just getting, I mean, if you're watching on YouTube, like this is a pattern that I continue to work through over and over again. I'm just making the linear upwards gesture with my arm. But that is, I think in Western consciousness, like we're all carrying some degree of this is where I am and this is where I'm supposed to be, and I'm not far enough along compared to where I'm supposed to be. Even the people that we put on the pedestal of the whatever 2 million EBITDA and series whatever, like I would almost guarantee that those people are also carrying, but X person is over there and I should be, and it's so refreshing. I noticed myself relaxing a lot when you were just sharing. Basically, I'm comfortable in my own skin. I'm going to go back to Squarespace, and it's not even going back. It's just doing something that feels more right and truer to me. And what a reframe that is. So thank you for the permission slip to me, and therefore imagine to many others who end up listening. I'm curious, this might be a silly question, and there's a few things that we'll unpack with what you just shared, but when you said spiraling up, I am actually not exactly clear on what it means to spiral up, and then you're like kind of end up in is that just a reference to, I don't even want to take a guess. What does spiraling up mean in this case?
Yeah. So if you think about like, is it rigatoni, like that spaghetti noodle that kind of like is a literal spiral, or if you think about a girl's curl, like it's like a coil.
Fusilli, I want to say.
Fusilli. Okay. Fusilli sounds more right. I love that. If you think about, or like a curl or anything that's winding, so like a coil. A lot of times, like we think about, spiral, like you spiral down. So like I have a downward spiral. Like I had a bad day, then it rained, my hair got ruined. Then I got, someone took the last pile of spaghetti, you know, at the buffet, blah, 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 blah. All of a sudden you spiral down. So it's like one thing after another leads you to kind of get into this, what I call doom loop of the downward spiral. But then there's also the opposite direction that we don't really pay as much attention to. Obviously, you know, we can get more into how your brain works, but where that same coil, instead of coiling and following that downwards, my fingers are going down. In this case, you're spiraling up, meaning that you follow that coil. And so it's like one of those kids' playgrounds where you can, you know, watch a kid walk around and around one of those little climbing toys. And that is really about noticing that every thing that you do might lead you to another level of expertise, of comfort, of confidence, of optimism, of energy. And that in order to spiral up, you have to come back around that circle and land in the exact same spot, except you might be an inch higher than you were in the last level. Mm. And that's where you look like you're in the same place, but you're actually a level above or a step above where you were. And this is where I think a lot of times when I think about progress with fitness goals are a little misleading, because you've got, you know, I'm doing VO2 max training right now. And it's like, if I'm spiraling up, that training looks like an actual improvement in distance. Again, it's that length, it's that up and to the right vibe. But when it comes to psychology, mental performance, mental fitness, I think that spiraling up is a really cool metaphor, because you end up coming back to the same problems, the same issues, the same self-work, but you show up to that work differently and a little stronger and at a different level. And that's the goal. And so, you know, when you talk about this idea of making progress over time, I think about feeling more equipped. Mm-hmm. And spiraling up is a big part of that visual for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So if we bring this back to a building block of mental fitness, what has supported you in connecting to the insight that I'm spiraling up? If I meet the same, I'm going to meet the same challenges. When I meet them, I am more equipped to navigate them, handle them, etc. What mental fitness tool, I don't know if that would be the way that you'd think about it, but like, what has allowed you to connect to that insight? Because that to me feels like one of the ultimate insights. I think a lot in my life about there's a lot of beautiful things about manifesting your life, or like being in this place of creation, or being in a, you know, that I've heard it phrased as by me consciousness. Like I create my own experience. If I set a goal, I know I can hit it. Like, I think these are all really wonderful beliefs to be walking around with. And I think a lot about life is going to flip the tables and give a bunch of stuff, or even in like more trivial ways, you get sick, and like, how do we spiral up when we get sick, or things like that. So how have you gone about building your capacity to navigate things like this and to spiral up?
So the tools that have really helped me, it's, you know, and I joke, this is where some people are like, are you starting a cult? It's my own product. It's the MYNDY framework that we use to break down mental fitness, because I used to think it was as simple as blank. But our psychology is pretty complex. The brain is the most complicated thing ever found on the planet. And there's kind of two things that let me recognize this, that I've now seen backwards. The first is that your brain needs 3 mind movements every day in order for you to start to see new perspectives. And this is what we call stop, slow, go. Stop is recovery, breath work, mindfulness, meditation. Slow is about cross training. This is about training your brain to see other perspectives. You can do this through cognitive behavioral therapy, visualization, creativity. There's infinite ways to cross train your mind, but the goal is to get your brain out of what it sees by default every day to keep us alive. And then the last is around go, which is what we call scoring. This is about recognizing the progress that you make every day, so you get a hit of dopamine and you start to build and maintain motivation over time. So we call it stop, slow, go. These are the basic functional movements your brain needs every day to feel good, so that you can see other perspectives. If you can't stop, you can't slow. If you can't slow, it's really hard to go. And so these are all interrelated. Now, these are related to what we call your mind muscles. There's 6 of them. It's what we call heart core focus. Everything in my model is cheesy because it's meant to be memorable. Heart confidence, optimism, resilience, energy, and focus. And so I was smiling earlier, Mike, when you said, I don't know that spirituality is a part of your model. Spirituality, religion, I always say these are ways to practice what we call heart, which is knowing, caring for, and grounding yourself. And religion, spirituality are great ways to practice mental fitness. So my model was really just working backwards, trying to figure out how do we take all the tools that we're using and know why and when we use them. But when it comes to this kind of thinking, optimism is the practice of flexible thinking. This is not about positive thinking all the time. It's about flexible thinking. And so there's 4 ways that you can kind of dissect or engage with that optimism muscle so that it gets stronger over time. But the most optimistic people we know, or what we call, they have the explanatory style of optimism. So the way they explain things in their head is what we call not personal, not permanent, not pervasive. When they're bad, and when they're good, they're personal, permanent, pervasive. So there's like a whole framework around this stuff. But once I had that model, it was really helpful to understand, wow, I met the love of my life a year and a half ago, ended up saying I love you very quickly and getting married. But before that, I had a very optimistic, strong muscle in work, but very weak in my dating life. So it became really helpful to say, wow, I need to work on building that optimism muscle in my dating life. And so it took a very subjective thing, which like everyone's like, look on the bright side, not helpful. That's not what optimism is all about. In our case, it's about the psychologically repeatable concept of, again, how you explain things in your head. And I was able to kind of self-diagnose. So that maybe felt like a rant, but the framework that I built is the most comforting thing in the world, because when things feel like you're spinning out of control, that's typically when people need to actively practice mental fitness. The hard part is that is exactly when we need strength. And if you don't have that strength built, then it can be really hard. And that's what our programs are about, is helping people, again, who are feeling particularly out of control, build those muscles during a time that's particularly hard for them, so that they can build those habits when things are good, so that they're then more prepared for the next time.
Okay. We are going to break each of these down. We're going to stop, slow, and go on stop, slow, go. Okay. Let's take some really everyday, some maybe even mundane examples of what this might look like. So I don't know, the pattern that it seems to get brought up all the time as the example, and I'm blanking on other examples right now. So let's just go with it. Traffic, right? You're going somewhere. Google Maps says you'll be there at 11:30 a.m. You need to be there at 11:30 a.m. You get stuck in an extra 25 minutes of traffic. There's an accident. This is the type of thing that, myself included, I'm not removing myself from this, that would send a lot of us into a spiral of some kind. So just wanting to put even more color on what you started to explain here. Stop, slow, and go. If we were to take maybe the initial here would be, oh my God, I'm always late. This always happens to me, right? Like, I guess if you could zoom us in on what would this look like in this case, and then if there's other cases that come to mind, it'd be helpful to hear. How do you use this in, I don't know, my boss sent an email, or my partner said something that really triggered me, or my 5-year-old, it won't stop cursing when we're at the park. There's all sorts of examples. Like, how do you apply stop, slow, and go in different contexts?
Yeah. So let me pick a fun one based on traffic, which just reminded me, this happened to me just a couple months ago. So I'm in traffic in New York City. I was the only person sane enough to drive there who didn't grow up there. And it's the last day after 5 years. I'm sorry, this was like a year ago now, I guess. It's the last day after 5 years of driving that I'm driving in New York. And then I'm getting rid of my car and everything's done. All I have to do is bring some stuff from my apartment in Williamsburg to my boyfriend's apartment in Chelsea. I get in the car. I'm literally no further than 50 feet from his apartment. And I decide I'm going to pull it into a spot. And I'm thinking, lucky day. I pull into the spot, and the edge of one of those wooden structures that houses a whole bunch of chairs, that popped up since COVID, was there. So it's like a wooden structure that's out in the middle of the street. All of a sudden, I hear a, I have hit the right side of my car with like on this wood thing. Now, not only does that happen, but all of a sudden all these cars are beeping at me because I've stopped in the middle of Manhattan midtown traffic. So this is where stop, slow, and go comes in. Me back in the day, I mean, I would have had a fucking panic attack. Excuse my language. I would have
You're allowed
gotten
to
out of
curse.
the car. Thank you. I would have gotten out of the car, called my mom. I don't even know, called the cops. Like this was like a problem because I could not get off the wall. Like, but I literally was like, Lissy, red, yellow, green, stop, slow, go. Stop. I took 3 deep breaths while everyone's beeping at me. Most people do not do that. And I've been training, I joke, this is Olympic level stuff, people. Like I've been training for this, for 6 years of building this business. I take 3 deep breaths. I tell myself, so what if I rip off the door? It's just the door. It's not like the whole car and I'm safe. And then I, sure enough, back, forth, finally get myself off the edge of this wooden thing. I pull into the spot and I just sat there and I did go, which is the practice of recognizing your wins. And I was like, I can't believe you just did that. I don't even have to get out and see the damage to the car to know that that was like, I handled that so well. Like anyone else I know would have just shit their pants. Like I was able to breathe. I was able to see, even in that moment, the perspective. So what? It's just a door. I'm safe. And then I was able to celebrate my win, which is I got off the door. I was okay. Everything's fine. I took a deep breath. I looked at the car. I ended up not only like completely messing up the door, but I scratched another panel. But all things considered, I only had to pay, it was only, I say only, guys, I thought I like ruined the entire car. Like the sound, I'll never forget it. It was like I had to pay $500 and my insurance covered the rest. Now it was like I had to go to the unit, whatever, I was moving, so more stress, blah, blah, blah. But like that's how you practice stop, slow, go. And the same thing in traffic. It's, it's the deep breaths. It's the taking a minute to understand what's going on for you. Wow, my heart rate is elevated. And why am I pissed when this happens every day? And, just noticing what's going on. Slow. What are other perspectives? What if this is happening for me, not to me? What if I'm supposed to be sitting here? What if I'm supposed to be listening to my podcast right now? Or like, why am I so angry? Like, wow, is my parent like this all the time? Like, what else could I be picking up here? And then the win is like, you're safe and you're okay. And that there's way worse things happening. I mean, look at today. We've got some great news across the world. We've got the hostages back in Israel. Like that's a win. You're in your car, you're safe, you're coming home every day. Like that's a win. So for some people, this might feel toxically positive. It's not, it's a practice. It's about actually finding another version of the truth in a situation so that you can get out of what our brain typically spends time on, which is the negative, which keeps us alive and protects us and is self-protecting from a psychological perspective often. But most of us think we are just this way. I'm just the kind of person who hates traffic. I am just the kind of person who has a temper. But none of us are just the kind of people, short of having some sort of clinical diagnosis, that can't be different if the way in which you're showing up is not serving you. And that's what I always say is important about mental fitness. The point isn't to activate flexible thinking all the time. If you're in a period of grief, I had a period where I lost 3 people I loved in a very short period of time. Grief served me. I needed to live there. But once I noticed that grief getting in the way of the rest of my life, which happened after a couple months, I realized I was stuck. That's when I needed to activate some of these muscles. So that's my very long answer to your very tight question.
It's a beautiful answer. And as a matter of fact, I want to ask you to keep going. Like if there were other examples that come up, that's an easy thing to get your arms around. If you're very visceral, very real, colorful, I am picturing the streets of New York City and what that might be like for me if I were to scratch my car and then have all the cars honking at me. God, I experience that in small ways. Like, yeah, my son, walking on the sidewalk and you kind of feel like people are walking up behind, and then I get like all apologetic. I'm sorry, like that type of thing, rather than being grounded and present and centered. So that's a very real example that everyone's going to be able to take away with them. Is there anything else that comes to mind? Totally okay if not, of course, and then we can get into there are a few other elements in the way that you were dissecting, breaking down mental fitness that could be really helpful to continue exploring besides this.
Yeah, I mean, it's countless for me. Like I'm constantly using, I always say stop, slow, go isn't just for you, it's for the teams that you're on. And like those teams can be work teams. They can also be your romantic teams. They can be your friendships. I just got in a little thing with my husband earlier today where he said something. I felt upset. I thought I was doing a really good job handling the situation. He felt like he was doing a good job. He got defensive. So then all of a sudden I was like, I don't really know what to do. So he left. We were like, okay, we'll talk more about this later. And I stopped. I was like, what's going on? I was like, oh, I was doing my job to handle my emotions, but that came off as really serious. And he wanted me, like, it didn't feel serious to him. So therefore, he felt like there was a problem. Slow. What are the other perspectives? Well, where was he at in this situation? Ooh. So we were both working really hard to make this situation good, and it just didn't turn out the right way. So I literally walked in the room and I was like, hey, stop. I stopped. This is what I noticed. This is what I also believe to be true, probably about how you were showing up, but here's some more perspective on me. And I think we're doing a really good job. And this probably isn't something worth spending much more time on beyond this.
Mm.
And like, helpful, right? He had like a response and like that was it. But this could have turned into like a day-long thing where we were both like stewing and whatever. And I think again, sometimes this is where the mental muscles come in. I was able to activate, and this is, we can get into some of this, but I was able to say, what's really at play here? What matters to me? This is heart, the practice of knowing, caring for, and grounding yourself. What's going on for him? Oh, okay. This is one of those things where we're actually aligned, and therefore, this is not an issue that we need to be spending a lot of time on.
Mm-hmm. We're gonna poke at a lot of the things.
Cool.
What is it about, like, this is, I believe it's in every habits book, Atomic Habits, and probably in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, this celebrating yourself or acknowledging yourself in some way is a really powerful reinforcement for the brain, which begets more of that type of behavior.
Yeah.
What is it about? What it sounds, as an adult, it can sound silly, I guess. Like your mom gave herself a star, which is awesome, and I can imagine a past version of me being extremely skeptical or judgmental of that. Rooting it in science of the brain is helpful. So what is the mechanism there? What's happening? Why is that powerful? What's reinforcing about it?
Yeah. So back up a little bit to like childhood. We cheer for kids always, no matter what. And we all could agree that it's like a very encouraging thing to do. You try to tie your shoe, you get it right, let's cheer. You get it wrong, let's cheer, because we want you to like show up to that thing again. And then you turn 18 and everyone decides it's not cool anymore to be positive. And instead, we're going to give you grades and jobs and money. And that's going to be the positive reinforcement you need. The challenge is like, we are, I love when people say like grownups are just like, kids with ties on. It's like we need, our basic needs are the same thing. Maslow's hierarchy of needs was not built for a 2-year-old versus an 18-year-old. It's for humans. And so just at the fundamental level, knowing that like the intuition that humans need that feels right for a lot of people. But I always say that there's like 2 things happening that I think are really fascinating. I'll share through the context of birthdays. People love their birthdays. Not everyone likes to be called out in public. Not everybody likes the happy birthday song. Usually we feel a sense of embarrassment, but we know that our birthdays happen every year. And there's like a couple people who don't want to celebrate their birthday, and usually because there's some sort of big T or little T trauma hiding behind that one experience. For the most part, we all agree like birthdays are worth it, which is funny because it's one of the few things we didn't earn, like we earn kudos everywhere, like we work to brush our teeth every day, but we're not celebrating that. But we celebrate just existing in the world. The people we should be celebrating on our birthdays is the person who brought us up into this world, whoever those people are. But we feel good on our birthday because it's all about us, and we're allowed and given permission to feel good. And when we celebrate in a way that feels somewhat authentic, I say somewhat authentic because a lot of people will say, well, sparkly stickers are not my thing. Singing happy birthday is not my thing, but even leaving someone alone on their birthday might be a form of celebration, right? In a case of a parent, when we do things that make us feel good in celebratory moments, we hit the dopamine receptor, And our brains then want more of that thing, which is funny because of course, we want our birthday every year because we hit the dopamine receptor in an unabashed way. We have people singing for us. We have people dancing for us. We have people making cake for us. We have people asking us our favorite food and celebrating our existence in the world. And so, of course, we want our birthdays to happen again because that felt really good. But then the flip side of that is, as adults, like, we don't celebrate things outside of our birthday. And so it feels really uncomfortable. And this is why I love the metaphor of mental fitness, because the psychology of being is that the things that we strengthen, that we double down on, that we do over and over again feel good and right. And the things we don't feel wrong, like trying to do a squat for the first time. Trying to do a squat for the first time is uncomfortable as shit. Like, nobody wants to do that ever again. The more you show up to that exercise, the better you feel. And you start to get more and more comfortable. Not to say anyone would choose a squat over celebrating their own birthday, but you don't hate it as much. Now, when you get better at doing that thing, it feels less and less uncomfortable, and therefore makes other people around you more comfortable and gives them permission to do the same. And so this idea that celebration hits the dopamine receptor, but that we don't do it and therefore it feels uncomfortable because we don't have the neural pathway built, is where, like, the irony or the paradox of celebration as an adult comes in. And I'm obsessed with that because a lot of people meet me and they're like, well, you're just the kind of person who's positive. I said, well, no, sure, you could say I have a disposition of optimism, which is different than the explanatory style. I was born more joyful than other people. But would you tell somebody who ran ultra marathons that they were just born more naturally athletic? Well, by the way, we do this all the time. There's like a very fancy psychological term for what we call people when they're just naturally good at things, when they actually spend all their time practicing. And so there is a world where, as adults, we need to practice what I call scoring. And this is the number one thing missing in the workplace for employees to feel good. It's the number one thing missing in our relationships for people to feel good, because we have no problem sharing bad stuff. And when we do share stuff, it tends to be constructive. And by the time we share it, it's like explosively bad. Like, we can't keep it in anymore. And so we're in this like really, really interesting time where people want to solve things with money. And I said, if you want to help yourself feel a little better, help the people around you feel better, be a better leader, think about creating better company, try appreciating and celebrating a little bit more. And not the stuff that's not people, like, it's not about celebrating toxically stuff that you shouldn't be celebrating. Like, I'm shocked that as many companies spend as much as they do on people's birthdays, but then they don't spend any time recognizing someone who gave a great presentation or somebody who's worked their ass off for a promotion. So yeah, I'll stop, but clearly so passionate about this topic because I just think it's so important.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Just quick housekeeping. Scoring is, when you said scoring, and like that's the thing it's celebrating people, acknowledging, is that?
Yeah. So we say stop, slow, go. Is stop is recovery, slow is cross training, and go is scoring, or like,
Mm-hmm.
capturing those wins. And so you have to score every day to feel good. And parents out there, if anybody's listening, parents do not keep score. And I'm not talking about keeping score in your relationship. I'm talking about keeping score about all the incredible, hard, arduous, monotonous work that you have to do every day to keep a human alive. And therefore we tend to feel like we're quote unquote bad at our jobs. And so this is one of the big things I try to, whenever I'm coaching a parent, we spend a lot of time on.
What do you think it is? Again, I'm not removing myself from this. This is still something deeply grooved within myself. What do you think that it seems to be this built-in collective of, I need to be hard on myself, constructively criticize, etc., in order to improve. And there's this either or paradigm around, if I score, celebrate myself, go, acknowledge myself, the motivation's not going to be there. I'm going to become complacent and not care about improving. And what you're saying, it sounds very clear that the best mechanism that we can use in order to improve is to celebrate where we are and how we continue to show up. What do you think it is about that feels so fleeting, or that insight hasn't so obviously connected for more people?
So there's like all my answers, there's like multiple parts to this. And it's
I'm here for all of them. We've got plenty of time.
I'm so happy. Okay. So I mean, first things first, there's this great psychology paper called Bad is Stronger Than Good. And they found that in like 50 different studies, there was 49 of them, people remembered the bad things over the good things, except for childbirth, where they believe that from an evolutionary perspective, women fog over the trauma of that experience so that they keep having kids. So, but in every other case, we remember the bad. And so our brain is wired to remember anything that might be a threat, dangerous, difficult for us so that we stay alive. And again, I'm so bored of this conversation, but for those who haven't seen this stuff, like, you know, when we were raised on the Sahara and there was something chasing us or a loud noise, it was a threat or a survival. So our brain is reacting to those things regularly. The challenge is that right now, today, those threats come in the form of emails, text messages, you know, television stories about, you know, our neighborhoods and then all the stuff. So all of a sudden our brain is I always say you never have to worry about remembering the hard, bad, constructive stuff because your brain's already capturing that very regularly because your brain has to. And so for those people who are worried about that, that's the first thing. The second thing is that a lot of people come to me with that. Like, I actually think the negative stuff kind of, you know, it pushes me.
Me too.
Yeah. And I think it's very real. I think it can absolutely be a motivator. There's a theory by a guy named George Bonanno, who's a resilience researcher, who says that we have something called post-traumatic growth, where when people go through difficult situations, over 70% of the cases, people grow from those. And that's kind of the opposite of that idea of post-traumatic stress. And not that people would choose to have those difficulties arise, but that when they did arise, they were really, you know, they were able to basically turn it into lemonade. They turn it into a learning, turn it into a growth opportunity. Like my previous, you know, we mentioned miscarriage. Like, you know, that was tragic and it stays that way. I would never want that to happen. But I said, you know, what in my life could I be making better so that I can feel better mentally, physically, and emotionally in this moment? So, and again, I needed more than a minute to be sad and to feel where I was at, but then I was ready at some point to kind of move through that. And so it's really important to realize that for the most part, post-traumatic growth is a choice that we can make. And again, the point isn't to grow immediately after trauma, but you can choose to grow. And so, yes, you can turn difficulty into strength. The other side of this is that human beings are motivated by good. Like I mentioned earlier, that kids, adults like hearing good things. And when they shrink and be like, oh, I don't need to hear that, it's because they feel uncomfortable because like a squat, they're not used to experiencing that emotion inside of them, which tends to be pride, excitement, joy. It's unfamiliar. And so it feels uncomfortable and they tend to want to make it go away. And in that research paper I mentioned to start, that, you know, bad is stronger than good, people need between 5 and 10 pieces of constructive feedback to be able to, 5 and 10 pieces of positive feedback for every one piece of constructive feedback. So in order to balance the negative, because that's all we're going to remember anyway, we have to hear a lot of good stuff. So I have a lot of managers come to me, but well, like, I don't want that person to like get lazy. It's the constructive feedback isn't you're killing it, you're crushing it, you're a rock star, which is like our generation's version of saying hello. It's, hey, you did a great job on that presentation. I really appreciate you being on time to that meeting today. Hey, I noticed that you got that report done on time, so I don't have to worry about it. I can't tell you how much that means to me. Very specific, very regular form of feedback. The challenge is most people don't give any positive feedback. And then when they give negative feedback, like I said, they don't do it often enough. And so, and I say negative, constructive stuff. So all of a sudden it's the one memory that somebody has and feedback turns into this like really negative experience. So this is a really complicated long answer to say, it's not as simple as saying, okay, go with God, score. It's understanding that most people find value from that voice in their head. Cool. But that voice in your head needs to learn how to coexist with the positive, because if you're a parent and raising kids, if you're a leader and trying to support other people, or if you personally are trying to build and maintain motivation over time, you have to balance the stuff that our brain remembers with some of the good stuff. And again, that's a practice, just like going to the gym. And I always say, it's not for your good days, it's for your bad days. Mm-hmm. So these practices, these mental muscles that you work to cultivate are there to pull you out of a difficult situation. They're there to help you lift the grocery bags when you're on, you're schlepping through town or whatever. They're not there for a perfect day when everything's going great and you don't need those muscles.
Mhm. It's interesting because mindset was, like, in a way, accidentally brought up in the conversation, but what you're talking about, it reminds me a lot of the insights from that book, which in so many words are about acknowledging and praising the effort or the showing up or willingness to go and do something, and not about a fixed mindset would maybe praise the outcome or the result only. Like, okay, we made a lot of money can become a very easy fixed mindset thing to, oh, I have a lot of money, so life is good. And if I don't have a lot of money, that, that means that I'm not doing good and I'm not a good person. And growth mindset sounds very aligned with what you're laying out here, which is you acknowledge when you show up. And like with kids, it does feel really easy. And well, I don't want to say really easy, but it's more intuitive. Like, I see adults all the time praising children's efforts for all sorts of things, which is a beautiful thing. And it makes sense that we would continue to do so over the course of our life. And so that's been one of the biggest pieces of every coach that I've ever worked with has pretty quickly been able to identify that that's a big opportunity for growth for me. I have a laundry list of all the ways that I want to improve. And I find it very easy to just brush by all of the amazing ways that I'm already currently showing up. I.e., what you said, I don't give myself enough credit for how I show up as a father every single day, and how I am taking care of my well-being and going for walks, and the way that I show up and serve my clients, and all of the things. And that, like, what a better foundation to build than attaching it to some outcome that's totally out of your control anyway.
For sure. For sure. And I think one more thing I didn't say, which is usually what I lead with, is that we're all tired, exhausted, and overwhelmed. And when you're tired, exhausted, overwhelmed, your brain has two purposes. One is to keep you alive. Two is to manage your finite resources. We default to these heuristics, either or thinking. Things are either great or bad. Catastrophic thinking. This is the worst thing in the world, right? Your negativity bias. And so we are wired to be negative humans. And when you're tired, it's a lot harder to practice this stuff, especially as a parent. And so it takes effort. And even though this feels quote unquote soft, I always joke, I was just working with somebody this morning. She's been depressed for months and months and months. And you cannot underestimate the power of practicing some of these things, because research shows it's like 1 to 2 minutes of these exercises. And, I'm sure we'll get there, but it's like, many people think they have to change their whole lives and whole demeanor. That's not what I'm talking about. There's multiple flavors of practicing mental fitness, just like physical fitness. You could be a Barry's boot camp person, a soul cycle person, or a workout from home with YouTube person. But yeah, you just got to do the work. And the more you do the work, the better you feel.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, let's get into, I'm just juggling a few things, but let's get into hardcore focus. And like, I love that we really slowed down on stop, slow, go. Really slowing down on what we could start with heart. I have it written down here. So it's knowing, grounding, and caring for yourself. Is that how you would define? If someone, that might sound a little
Soft,
squishy is what I was gonna say. Soft, like same thing as mental fitness. I think is that one of the things I love about you is that this isn't soft at all. This is something that's very grounded and practical. And so if someone were to start addressing heart and knowing, grounding, caring for themselves, what might they start doing? How would they go about doing this? And what's important about doing this?
Yeah. So let's just start with like the research first, because I think that is really helpful to make sure people don't think that we're like, getting into scary, too much self-care talk over here. My folks tend to be afraid of that. So much of what we know about the brain has only been really addressed in like the last 35 years. The founder of positive psychology, Martin Seligman, won an award in 1990 for his work on optimism, learned optimism specifically, which is where it came out of his work on learned helplessness, which is what they found was that some rats and people who learned how to be helpless after hitting the food pellet for a given period of time and food wouldn't come out, they just never stopped. like hitting the food pillow. They just never gave it up. But a bunch of them did. And they learned how to be helpless. And they've been able to extrapolate a lot of those thoughts. And by the way, he had won the award based on learned helplessness. But a big question from the crowd came from this very famous man. And it was like, but what about the people who never gave up? And previous to 1990, a lot of psychology was really focused on mitigating the bad. It was like sick care. It was folks who had like depression, anxiety, like clinical anxiety and depression. But after that, it was really focused more on prevention and wellness. And when I think about Heart Math is an organization that basically found that your heart sends more signals to your head than your head sends to your heart on a regular basis. Meaning that the way you feel has a greater impact on what you think than on what you think has on how you feel. So one of my favorite examples to use is like a lot of people hate their jobs and they like have these like, crisis moments. They talk to a friend, a therapist, a loved one, and they're like, oh man, I just can't do this anymore. Take a deep breath. And they're like, I'm just going to suck it up. And they go to work the next day and something small happens and they just break. And this is where your heart, you did not align what you were feeling with how you were thinking. You were like, I'm just going to deal with this. But in your heart, you were like, this place sucks. I can't do this anymore. I'm like suffocating every minute I was here. This was like my first job, how I felt. Now, like all of our mental muscles, they all have a definition. They all have a commitment. And they've got 4 scientifically backed categories of work you can do to work on them. So when it comes to heart is the practice of knowing, caring for, and grounding yourself. My professor from MIT hated this word. She's like, can't we make up a new one? I was like, I'm not going to make up a new word if this is literally what we mean. But heart sits at the center of the model. It's also a multiplier for all the other pieces in our math equation, which we can obviously talk about after. But it's a commitment to yourself and your needs. Now, people, again, might say this feels soft. There's 4 ways to build it. You can do all 4 of these together as a cycle, which I'll explain, or you can do them separately. But when we say you practice heart is about knowing what you love and what you care about. This could be your values. This could be as simple as the things that bring you joy. One of the craziest experiments ever, I had hundreds of people, 60 seconds on the clock, write down what makes you happy. Most people couldn't get past 10. It's hard. We're not asked that as an adult very often. But knowing what you love is the first step. The next one is intent. It's knowing your why. Simon Sinek talks about this, but this is about knowing your purpose. Now, a lot of people are like, I'm looking for my purpose. You can find a purpose in the moment. For some people, for that individual I mentioned who dislikes their job, sometimes the purpose is paying your rent. And if you really need that to happen, if you live in New York City, that is a big enough purpose to drive you. Now, if you're not connecting with that purpose in your relation to your job every day, that's where the disconnect comes between head and heart. So intent is about your why. The third thing is truth, knowing what's true for you. So truth is really about being honest with yourself. Most of us struggle with this. And it's not because we're not trying, but it's because we don't have time and we don't have space. So we'll talk about that in a second. Last but not least is emotion. It's how we feel. There's a woman named Lissy Alden, and she talks about our idea that our emotions are predictive weather patterns. They're not necessarily true. So I love the example she gives. She says, you might see out of the corner of your eye a light blue car, and the person you used to date had a light blue car, and all of a sudden you start feeling sad and you don't even know why. Now, without creating that metacognition we started this call with, seeing your thoughts not being them. Wow, I'm feeling sad. I wonder why those sad thoughts are going through my head. You wouldn't know that you needed to shift them and that there may have been some sort of subconscious piece of your brain trying to help protect you. In this case, from sadness. Now, the way that these things come together, hold on. Sorry about that. Is that you've got love, intent, truth, emotion. So let's see, you can do exercises within all of these separately, or you can bring them together. Let's just pretend reading is my example. This is my favorite one to give. I used to say I loved reading before bed. L, why? It made me feel smart. The truth, I'd read 1 or 2 pages every day and I would fall asleep and then keep ordering books, and the books make me feel guilty, which is my emotion, right? I feel guilt and stress over my reading. So what is the real truth? I come back to T again, or to love. What I really love is nonfiction fluff books. Why do I love them? They make me feel like I'm escaping. So what's the truth? I need to be reading these before bed because it's my form of escapism, so I can calm down my body and get off to bed. And the emotion is I feel joy when I'm reading them. So it's a great example of a time when I was being honest. I love reading my nonfiction books on work. I just don't like reading them before bed. And I certainly don't need to be reading more nonfiction before bed right now. And we're constantly making these choices. We're saying, I'm going to do this thing because my 21-year-old self loved it.
Hmm.
Or I love doing it then and now I need to do it now. And so this kind of cycle of what we call practicing heart has a lot to do with making sure that as a multiplier, how you're feeling is aligned with what you're thinking.
Hmm. I'm gonna zoom in on one thing, and then we're gonna keep you rolling. And you are rolling, by the way, despite having a cough. And I apologize for making you talk so much
No,
while you
you're
have a cough.
good.
But
You're good.
how would one start to identify or pay what signals might someone pay attention to know that they are telling the truth within themselves?
Yeah, it's a good question. I always say when you're revisiting the same commitment, habit, or intention without seeing much action. So back to that original example I mentioned about looking for a job. If you're constantly talking about how shitty your job is, but then you haven't done or taken the steps to align, it's because you're probably lacking some sort of connection with your why,
Hmm.
either of staying or going. You're
Hmm.
stuck. Um, Another example might be like the books thing. I was reading books, but I wasn't making progress. I wasn't actually like moving through the books. Meanwhile, I read like 25 pages in 10 minutes of my stupid, will never tell you the title, not even if you put a gun to my head book last night. It's like, do I have a reading disability? I think so, but when I read that book, it doesn't feel like it. So it's if you're not making progress and if you're feeling stuck on something, it's usually because you're out of alignment between your head and your heart. So that's always a good sign. And then I'd say lastly, if you're just not feeling good consistently about something, relationships are a great example. A lot of times you've got your head around something. This person is great on paper. They've got a great job. They're kind to me. They're nice. But like you're not feeling it. Like, what do you love? How do you want to feel? What's the truth? This is where a lot of times people get stuck, especially as they get older. Speaking as somebody who met their person way older, like you are trying to reconcile between what you're feeling and what you're thinking and what all the people are telling you in the world, which is you need to get married soon. In those moments, you feel stuck. Um, that's another great example.
Hmm. Hmm. We're not going to have as much time to get into all of the other elements, but if we just quickly take a swipe at I forget what they are, the COR and E, and then focus, I guess the 10 minutes or less version on those.
Yeah, of course. So I'll buzz through these using an example, if that's okay.
Great.
I've been teaching these for a long time. So when I was about 30, I decided that I was going to take hip hop class. Hip hop was something I wanted to do because at the time I was in grad school and I kept getting challenged all these dance offs and I have like some big dance energy, but I felt like I could barely make the beat. Not to mention every other time I had been to like a dance class, I usually walked out halfway through. Like I had never really, I always had desired it, but then I would like leave being like, this isn't me. I can't. But I was in grad school. I wanted something to take my mind off of like the brutal math that they were making me do at MIT. So I decided to sign up for this hip hop class. So to start with heart, my why was taking my mind off of really hard stuff, challenging myself to something new. And I always loved rap music, like always, like that was like my go-to. So I decided to practice focus. Focus is the practice of putting your intention towards one thing.
Hmm.
Now, as somebody with ADHD, most people would be like, well, I'm neurodiverse and I can't do that. I said there is a big difference between attention and intention. Intention is about being clear on what you're directing yourself towards. And so it's a lot less about physically paying attention and a lot more about knowing. If I were to say, what's the single most important thing you need to be doing right now, or today, or this month, or this year, you should be able to answer me on that. Most people can't. It's like an athlete trying to score without knowing where their goals are, or worse, having 20 goals that they need to shoot on and never feeling like they can win a game. And so focus is the practice of your intention. I decide that out of work or out of school, I'm going to show up to my hip hop class. So now I'm not feeling particularly confident. My class is coming up. It's on a Tuesday. Tuesday hits and I need to build confidence. Well, like all of these, there's 4 scientifically backed ways to build confidence. Most people think about confidence as self-worth, like I'm amazing, I'm great. But the psychologically repeatable concept of confidence is your belief in your ability to do a task. Not well, just show up to it. Most confident people we know believe in their ability to finish something or do something. So I always like to say to people, as a result of that definition, how confident are you could wash a dish? 10 out of 10. How confident are you could make it into the WNBA tomorrow with no practice beyond this warning? 1 or 2, right? Once I've gotten a 4.
People raise their hand to that.
Yeah, raise their hand, which I love, by the way. Love it. Do it, baby. So this is where the definition of confidence is about your commitment to task. And just, I'm only going to walk through the 4 ways to build it for this one example, just so this can bring it to life. But there are 4 psychologically repeatable ways to build confidence over time, or belief in your ability to show up. 1, you grow it. So you go watch other people. So in the case of sports, you watch tapes. In the case of me, I watched YouTube videos of people doing hip hop. You role play, you practice. Most athletes show up to practice every day. For me, I was practicing in my apartment basically 2 weeks leading up until my class, which sounds crazy because you're like, Lissy, it's just a class. But for me, I wasn't feeling confident, and role play is the single most important thing you can do to build that confidence. 3rd is you have other people pump you up. So I called my mom. She told me I was amazing. And then you warm up your body through ritual or some sort of routine. This is where you've got athletes who wear certain numbers and listen to certain music and eat certain foods. So you grow it. You go watch other people, role play, other people pump you up, and you warm up your emotions and your body. So now all of a sudden I show up to class and I'm like, okay, I'm ready to do this. But my question was, what happens when you're confident in something? You show up and it doesn't go well. So sure enough, I show up to class, the teacher's like 80, and I'm thinking, lucky me, like this is going to be easy. But it turns out she was one of the head dancers at Alvin Ailey in New York City for her whole life. So she may have been 80, but she was also like still lifetimes faster, more nimble than I will ever be. And so she had us very quickly hit the floor, and all of a sudden my knee cracks. It's me and all 18-year-olds. Okay. I'm 30 at the time. Everybody else stands up and continues, and I'm stuck. This is where the explanatory style of optimism comes in your head. The psychologically repeatable concept of optimism is the practice of flexible thinking. So an optimist in that case would say it's not personal, I'll get better over time. It's not permanent, meaning I'll get better over time. It's not pervasive, meaning I am good at other things. But in that moment, pessimistic explanatory style popped in. It's personal, I'm old. It's permanent, I'm going to be stuck here forever. It's pervasive, I suck at all these other things in my life, which was true because at the time I was at MIT and not doing great in my math classes, stats classes. So I could have told that story, but the other part was I'm new, I'm going to get better. Not everything in my life I'm bad at. So this is where commitment to the right thinking comes in with optimism. But then once you have the right thoughts, then what? It's about taking action. That's resilience. Resilience is the practice of picking yourself up and moving forward. This is about commitment to action. I bought a 10-pack, which made me show up for another 10 classes. And then leads us to our last but not least here, which is energy. Energy is the practice of fueling yourself or building up your foundations. And this is what we call the double bacon, egg, and cheese model. But this is really about making sure you have enough energy to actually show up and feed your mind. So most people who come to me struggle because they don't have the right mindset to achieve their goals. But it turns out they don't have the right energy to feed the mindset to achieve their goals. Mm-hmm. Meaning, if your brain takes up 2% of your body weight and between 20 and 35% of the energy you burn every day, but you don't have enough energy to give, you can't think well. And this is when we tend to default to our negativity bias, because that's from an evolutionary perspective. Again, it keeps us alive. And all of a sudden, you've built this doom loop cycle where you don't have energy to think, so your brain defaults to keeping you alive. So all of a sudden, you're only reminding and remembering negative stuff. And then you can't get anywhere you want to go. And so energy is about making sure you have the energy to think well and do new things, because it takes energy to build new neural pathways. So bringing all these things together, I had my why, I picked my intention. I was very clear on how I needed to show up to be more confident. When I had gaps in my thinking that were going to keep me from moving forward, I found another truth, or I thought flexibly. I had a plan to get up and keep moving. I made sure I had the energy I needed to keep going. And so we always say your mental muscles all work together. They're interconnected in the actual visual that I show people. But these all come together in an equation because they're all interrelated in different ways. But I'm obsessed with it because once my clients understand this, not only do they diagnose their own mental fitness, they can diagnose the people around them. And all of a sudden the world doesn't turn into this like completely emotional, scary place. It's actually a place where you can fundamentally diagnose and understand the psychology of yourself and people around you so that you can solve for it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, part of me wishes that we had just all day long to keep going around this. I'm mindful that we're starting to brush up on the time boundary. I think there's a couple more questions I have before we move it to a close here. So one of them is around, and I've heard you speak about this before, how energy really is the most important. It's not, I would say most people have a lot of focus on time, money, things like that, and not a lot of prioritization around energy. At a really high level, what might someone look at if they were to take stock of their energy and set their life and days, etc., up so that they have energy?
Yeah. So I used to teach people our entire what I call bacon double bacon egg and cheese model, BBEECC. And then what I found was that in training people, most people weren't doing the 5 fundamental kind of foundations of energy building. And so that's around sleep, movement, breaks, nutrition, and tech use. So this is really about making sure that you've got, I hate the term sleep hygiene because it makes people sound dirty if they're not doing these things, but it's around having these like proper sleep habits, going to bed and waking up at the same time being, you know, the primaries here, besides putting your phone away from your head. Movement is not about exercise. This is about moving your body throughout the day. When you sit, your neurochemicals become imbalanced. We were born to move. I always say not all of us were born to run. I have some pretty bad knees over here. But at the end of the day, making sure you're moving throughout the day is a really important way to make sure your neurochemicals are balancing themselves out and you can think clearly, maintain focus, and make sure you get the oxygen you need because of your respiratory rate obviously changes when you're sitting versus standing. Tech, most of us, I always say technology is like sugar or anything, you know, it's just too much of it is too much. Even if you look at apples, like you can't eat too many apples, it'll just spike your blood sugar, even though it's healthy for you in moderation. Most of us have forgotten how to make sure we're using technology intentionally, and just focus being a huge part of this model. So making sure you're watching not just your email, not just your social media, but also your texting while double screening. That is cognitively very expensive, people, just as expensive as trying to work on 2 things at the same time. And it's exhausting. And it's part of why a lot of people struggle to fall asleep. Breaks, obviously related to tech use and also movement. But this is really about making sure you're taking breaks in whatever you're doing. Your brain can't, even though you think you can physically function over and over and over again in back-to-back meetings, time and time again, we show your brain just doesn't function at the same level, same speed, or same clarity when you're in back-to-backs. So making sure you take breaks matters. And then nutrition was actually not on my original, I call them like, you know, your 4 basics. But the more I started working in healthcare, the more I realized that, you know, I have to eat 6 times a day. I have hypoglycemia and a couple health issues. A lot of people don't eat, and they think that like intermittent fasting is an excuse to not fuel. Women, as in a special category here, we have to eat more frequently than men. We have an impact on our cortisol and hormones when we don't. And more importantly, even if you are intermittent fasting, you have to make sure you get the right amount of protein and nutrients in those smaller windows, which can be a real challenge for folks. And so making sure that you're fueling in a way that feels aligned with your body and your needs and your time of life, like really, really matters. So those are what I would say are your 5 energy fundamentals.
Yeah, something else that's coming up for me that feels like it would be pretty important is, well, a couple of things. One is time outdoors, and that could be combined with some of the other elements as well. And then time with loved ones or people that you feel a sense of connection, belonging, etc. with. Like I imagine those would be energizing.
For sure. And actually, funnily enough, those are environment and connection are 2 of the elements in like this bigger, more robust model. What I'm finding is that most people I know actually aren't struggling with those 2 things.
That's
They
great.
actually are connecting with people. But as I always like to say, even if you're not connecting with people, if you can't fuel correctly, you will find yourself getting into more arguments with people you love. If you are not taking breaks, it will be really hard for you to get outside. So all of a sudden, like this is why we call them the fundamentals. You're 100% right. And I just find that most people, aren't necessarily struggling with those if, for example, they're taking enough breaks.
Yes. Understood. Is there anything that we've got 15 minutes or so left here. Is there anything we haven't gotten to today that feels important to bring into the conversation now? And if not, I have just a couple more things before we wrap.
Yeah, I think, one more thing. I mean, there's always one more thing. I could say 1,000 things. I like love this work and I'll be studying it until I die. I think one more thing though I would love to share is that it's a big mistake. People think that knowing is the same thing as doing. And self-help tends to be an amalgamation of a whole bunch of books and a whole bunch of knowledge and the ability to quote Peter Attia's latest podcast or, whatever, in order to show that you're paying attention. Someone way smarter than me said, show me your calendar, I'll show you your life. It's like, are you doing this stuff? Like, if you haven't put into action your last favorite book, like at least one action from your last favorite book, like do not pick up another.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where mental fitness is real, because you don't get to be fit by going to yoga once and calling yourself fit. You don't get to go to the Hoffman Institute or a workshop or a coach for 6 weeks, 8 weeks and call yourself good. You need to be practicing this stuff every day. And people are saying they're shocked. I mean, the amount of again, nonfiction self-help I read now more during the day than at night. I love it. I want to be better. But in order to be better every day, you have to do every day. And so if you get nothing else from this, and I'm sorry, it's, we're an hour and 20 minutes into things right now. But if you get nothing else from this, it's what's the one thing that you could be doing that's going to help you feel a little better, because mental fitness is not about knowing. It's about making sure you take action.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would bet a pretty penny that people got more than just one thing, but that is a good one thing to be rolling with and taking away. So just a couple more things from me. One question that's been stirring in me throughout the interview that could be an interesting one is what's been a surprising, as you've studied more and more human behavior, the brain, the nervous system, what's been something that surprised you or stood out to you that maybe you viewed as different when you got started a few years ago, 5+ years ago?
I'd say what's old is new again.
Mm-hmm.
I built this model. In all fairness, I tested it a lot. I tested it with groups of people. I tested by teaching. I tested, through assessment. I could talk about that, and I kept expecting to find a piece of work that would blow open everything that I did. And I've moved things around in the model. The equation has changed in terms of what the weight of things, but whether you're talking about religion, spirituality, self-help, leadership, performance psychology, physical fitness, health, wellness, whatever, it all fits into this category of long-term behaviors that help you improve yourself every day.
Mm-hmm.
And the people that I want to be around, the people who love working with us, the people who, that we partner with, they all are focused on long-term, better everyday vibes. And I think I was really taken by a lot of the research when I first started, because I'm like most of my clients, I think head first and then heart. And I think the other surprising thing was that we've gone all heart or all head. So it's all spiritual, words like nourish, self-care, calm, or it's, 3 milliliters of Yoo-hoo, are going to, set you into a diabetic shock.
Optimize.
And I think anything, the truth is somewhere in between. And so I hope to be that place that people can go in between, because I don't think we're speaking to the majority of people the majority of time in a way that they can hear us.
Mm-hmm. Well, in the intake, I always ask two things. One of them is, what's one question you would love to be asked? I believe you've already addressed this, but I'll give you an opportunity if there's a different way you would like to answer it now. Why do you still do what you do after all these years is the question that you wanted to be asked. Is it something that hasn't already been addressed? If so, why do you still do what you do after all these years?
It fires me the fuck up. I love it. It's life-changing. There's nothing like this on the market. Sometimes I wonder why I'm still doing what I do, given how few, we'll call them publicly visible signals there are about what I'm doing. And in these small rooms, in my one-on-ones, in my conversations, in my research, there is nowhere to go to practice these things. And even though they feel simple to understand, they are really, really hard to do because the world is noisy. And so yeah, I wanted you to ask me this question because on a bad day, I want to be able to come back to this and remind myself of that not only is there a gap in the market, but it's one that I feel every day, and that, this work has literally changed my life. Like I can countless ways. Yeah. And I want to be able to help other people figure that out too. So yeah, I do what I do because I love it and it works.
Mm-hmm. Well, the final question that I ask in every interview, the podcast is called Mike's Search for Meaning. So I'm curious, it's going to rhyme with what you just said probably, but if the answer is different, how would you describe what it means to Lissy to live a meaningful life?
First off, I love the name of this podcast. It's one of my favorite books, Man's Search for Meaning. When I saw this, it made me laugh. So thank you for that. My mom described one time a great life as somebody who does good, is good to the people around them, gives back to their community, and pursues meaningful work. I would say that a good life is lived by somebody who is, and I've said this multiple times throughout this. I think it's somebody who's just trying to be a little better every day.
Mm-hmm.
For themselves and the people and communities around them. And sometimes I think that means that people are able to very actively give more formally to other people. And sometimes I think it's just about creating, as little mayhem as you can within your personal relationships in your life. But I think, yeah, that's a life well lived is seeking to be a little better every day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, Lissy, I want to end by acknowledging you. You are someone who I experience as showing up with great passion, joy, energy, excitement, authenticity. There's a lot in here that you divulged about things that you've been through and weaved into stories that could make each of our lives better, which just demonstrated in your answer for a meaningful life is when you're uplifting other people in so many words. That's part of what creates meaning. And I experience you as someone who's really leading with that, and also who has done the rigorous research and understanding, and who is intentional and careful about the way that she teaches things, demonstrates things, and makes sure that it's not only useful and practical and applicable for those who are listening, but also that it's human and fun and brings a lot of color and richness. So there are a lot of things that I think when I go back and re-listen to this that I'm going to get out of it. We covered a lot of ground, and it was a joy to have a formally recorded conversation with you like this. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Mike. It really means a lot. This has been super fun, and thank you for being so thoughtful in your questions too.
Of course. There's one thing I did forget. We have a little bit of time, and I always raise awareness for an organization of my guest choice. Just a word or two about Streetwise and your affiliation with it, or the work that you do with them.
Yeah, so Streetwise is an organization that works with, it tends to be first gen families or individuals to go to college, to work in a desk job, that kind of thing, but they get them prepared to get into the corporate workforce. So like resume readiness, interview prep, helping them like structure their job search. I got involved with them, I don't know, maybe 4 years ago or so, maybe longer. But I have two mentees, one formal, one informal from the program. One meaning we formally went through training. I was just on the phone with him yesterday, who I adore, named Ivan, and another named Stanley, who I met actually, who just happened to be at the organization. But it's a pretty incredible company that basically helps people with access to opportunities. When we talk about building confidence and this idea of like going and watching other people and role play and practice, like it really creates a safe environment for folks to start to move into jobs that help them pursue something that's closer to their dreams. A lot of times it's related to yeah, things that they're really excited about that lights them up and that they wouldn't normally have access to. So love the organization. And most importantly, I love my mentees coming out of the program.
Well, I will be donating. I'll make sure to make a mention of Streetwise in the intro, and it'll be linked in the show notes. So
Cool.
thank you again, Lissy, for everything that you've done today and for the person you are. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Sending each of you lots of love. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen to Mike's Search for Meaning. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, share this episode with your friends, and leave a review. I look forward to seeing you next time, my friends. And until then, stay safe, stay well, and keep living with purpose. Peace.